Welcome back to Mid-Ice Crisis. I'm your host, Josh Cybulski. This week, we're going all Edmonton Oilers. We're going to talk about what the hell do you do in Edmonton if you are general manager Stan Bowman. What a mess. What a mess. Let's get into it. Mid-Ice Crisis brought to you by Cwench Hydration. Head on over to quenchhydration.ca/secondstorypod to get 15% off any of your purchases. That is quenchhydration.ca/secondstorypod. Use the promo code secondstorypod to get 15% off. I got a stray hair there. I don't normally do the show without a hat. How about that? Showing that I'm not a bald 40-year-old man. So let's talk Oilers, shall we? Of course, they were bounced in the first round pretty handedly by the Anaheim Ducks. A bit of controversy in one of the games there with the Ryan Poehling goal on Tristan Jarry. That aside, that is the Tristan Jarry experience, and we might as well start with him. Look, I don't know what you do about your goaltending if you're the Edmonton Oilers. All I know is that you can't go into next season, if you're going to keep Connor McDavid in the mix and you plan to take another shot at this thing, which is presumably why you re-signed him to a 2-year deal. If you're going to take two shots at this, you got to go out and you got to get a better goaltender. You also got to get defensive help for that goaltender. And look, a lot of people say like they're a poor defensive team and that's why Jarry struggled. But Jarry struggled in Pittsburgh for years. Also not a great defensive team, but you look at the goals that he let in, melting down in the biggest moments, tends to give up a lot of first shot goals or goals on the first three shots of the game. His rebound control is just horrific. There was a point, I remember reading this. I'm not going to go back and find it, but I remember reading this a couple months ago that at one point, like 3 out of every 4 shots that was on Jarry, he was letting off a rebound. Like, that's bananas. That's like, I mean, it's got to be top of the league. So you're just constantly bleeding second opportunities to your opponent. Fire the puck on net. Oh, I'm going to kick that. Oh, geez, look at that. Rebound. Oh, geez, look at that. Another rebound. Like, that's the Jarry experience. Sorry, it is. You got to get a different goaltender. In fact, you need 2 different goaltenders. But you look around at the rest of the Oilers line. First off, I don't know how they're going to go do that because the assets that they have, and that's going to be an issue throughout this episode, is the assets that they have simply are just not that great. Really not that great. They don't have a good prospect system. They have limited draft picks, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit. And like off their roster, who are you really going to trade? That's the problem. If you're Edmonton, you've bled out between Ken Holland and now Bowman. Like you're just constantly bleeding young players, and you're replacing them with old players. So this year, Scott Wheeler, the Athletic, who's as far as prospects go, that's who I tend to cite. He's got them ranked 30th for the prospect system this year. So that's their prospect pool. 30th out of 32 teams. Not terrific, not great. And in terms of draft picks on the way, they've got no first round pick this year, presumably next year as well. That one's a protected first round pick that they traded for Jason Dickinson. And Tuck as well was part of that trade. This year, you do not have a 4th and a 5th as well. So you've got a 2nd, a 3rd, a 6th, and a 7th. And then next year, you have a 2nd, 2 5ths, a 6th, and a 7th. And even the 2 years after that, you have no second-round picks either of those years. That's 2028, 2029. You have moved a lot of shit out. Let's be real. You've moved a lot of shit out over the years. And what do you have in terms of a roster? What do you have in terms of your projection for next season? Well, right now they've got roughly about $16.5 million of cap space, and you have 15 guys signed, which means you have 8 guys to sign, and you've got $16.5 million to do it. And I've had people come at me on TikTok, on Instagram, and they're like, oh, they're going to fucking retool in the summer. With what? No picks, no prospects, no cap space. What are you retooling with? Seriously, you have your Draisaitls, your McDavids, your Hymans, your Nugent Hopkins, and your Trent Fredericks. You got Matthias Janmark signed. You got that's it basically. You got I think 1 or 2 other guys. You got Matthew Savoie signed, up front. Then you got Evan Bouchard, You got Darnell Nurse, which is a disastrous contract. You got Jake Wallman, which is another disastrous contract. And you got Matthias Ekholm, which is a good contract. And then Ty Emberson's still there too, defensively. And then in that, of course, you got the albatross that is Tristan Jarry. So those are your guys you have signed. Outside of Draisaitl, McDavid, and Bouchard, it's pathetic. I put Hyman in the camp of not being pathetic, and Nugent Hopkins has been pretty good too. So what, you got 5 or 6 guys? Okay, good. That's a nice starting point. You got nothing else. They basically, as it stands right now, they don't have a bottom 6, and they really lack. I mean, they have 2 very expensive left shot defensemen, neither of whom I would want playing in my top 4. I don't want Nurse and I don't want Wallman in my top 4. If I'm a true team that's competing, I don't want either of them in the top 4. Problem. Big problem. So what do you do if you're Edmonton? Keep it in mind, you got $16.5 million and you got no prospects and no picks, and you got to try to somehow also move Tristan Jarry. Let's go sign Stuart Skinner. You know, that's just what Edmonton needs, is a Stuart Skinner to come in, solidify the goaltending. No. So there's 2 things that can happen here, right? You get a lot of people like to debate like the ideal, which is sort of like the NHL 26, like I'm playing on be a GM mode. And then there's the reality of what you can do. The only move you can make with Tristan Jarry, you can't buy him out. You cannot. It doesn't save you any money. So you can bury him in the minors and take the $1.1 million that you save or whatever it is next year. So you're taking a $4.2 million cap hit on him. But then you got to go out and find a goalie to replace him. Or you trade him along with an asset, which presumably, he's got 2 years left on his deal. You look at the Pittsburgh Penguins took back Kevin Hayes from St. Louis. That was 2 years ago. It was a $3.5 million cap hit. Pittsburgh took him in exchange for, along with a second-round pick, for nothing. So that was the price of doing business. Now, given the salary cap situation where it's at, I think that's probably a good framework for trading away Tristan Jarry. It's probably going to cost you a second-round pick to dump him on another team. Now, who are you dumping him on? A team that probably doesn't want to win, but here's a wrinkle in doing that, and this is where it gets real tough. What do you think Jarry has in his contract? He's got a no-trade list. He's got a 12-team no-trade list. So you try to do that with 2 years left on his deal. First off, you have to do it after July 1st, and this might be the saving grace for Edmonton, is that I believe it's either July 1st or July 15th. Tristan Jarry has a signing bonus that's due. It's a $3 million signing bonus. It means next year his base salary in actual cash is $1.125 million. So that might be a situation where a team doesn't feel too bad about it because they're actually only going to pay him $1 million and change. And if you're a bad team and you're a team that's just trying to reach the salary cap floor, that's actually not bad. But the thing you run into with Jarry is he may put that team on his no-trade list. Guys are strategic, right? Even though he's only got a 12 team, that means you could be traded to 20 teams. He's going to be strategic about the teams that want to take him or would be willing to take him, and he might put those teams on the list and then leave a team, for example, like Pittsburgh. He's not going to put Pittsburgh on his no-trade list because there's no way Pittsburgh would take him back, right? A team like that's got, New York Rangers, they're not going to take Tristan Jarry, or they're pretty unlikely. So he'd probably leave them off of his list. And this is where guys can turn a 12-team no-trade list into a much longer, bigger. So just one thing to keep in mind. So after this season, Jarry is actually owed, in terms of actual cash that he's going to be paid, once he gets that signing bonus, he's owed just $5.125 million in actual cash. Meaning that if you trade for him in, say, August, you're going to pay him, you're going to have him for 2 seasons, but you're only going to pay him just over $5 million, which is, if you're a team that looks at him and maybe he's a guy who could be in your crease as like part of a platoon, and maybe you hope that he can bounce back and you can trade him towards the end of his contract, maybe at a trade deadline, and recoup some assets. So maybe you get a second round pick this summer And in a year and a half, you can get another third or third and a fifth or something like that. And you just pay him $5 million. You need a guy. Like, somebody's got to play goalie. So for a lot of those teams, maybe some of the bottom rung teams of the NHL, they might be willing to do that. But that's Edmonton's hope. Is you got to staple an asset to him and just move him along and open up that cap space for yourself. You don't want to have to retain if you can help it, because Edmonton's already got enough dead money to deal with, right? They've already got enough dead money between like the Jack Campbell buyout. You've got bonus carryover from last year that you're going to deal with. It's not much, but it's $250K. I mean, it's you combine it with Jack Campbell's buyout, which is $2.6 million next year. It's almost $3 million of dead money, right? You don't want to throw in another 2.5 for Jari, and all of a sudden you're carrying, $5.5 million of dead cap. It's not great. Not great for a team that doesn't really have much except cap space in terms of trying to bring guys back. But in terms of bringing guys back that were free agents, I think Jack Roslovic is probably going to explore the market again, even though he's had a couple of really tough runs in the market. But I don't know if you're getting him back for $1.5 million like you did last year. So that's he had 21 goals. That's an effective player who's walking out the door. Obviously you clear the cap space, but it's not great. That was one of your better bargain deals that you had. You're gonna have to re-sign Colton Dach. I don't think he's gonna get too much. He had 9 points, so that's a guy you probably are gonna bring back. I think he's gonna be on a 2-way deal. Kasperi Kapanen, I mean, you can kind of go either way on him. He's a guy who can play in your bottom six. I don't particularly like Kasperi Kapanen, but played 41 games and had 17 points. Like, when he's engaged, he can be an effective player. If you get him at $1 million, I mean, maybe he's a guy that you bring back. But like, outside of Roslovic, like, we're talking about bargain guys here, right? When Edmonton actually goes into the free agent market, it's going to get really tough to find value in there. And that's what Edmonton has to find. Like, what Edmonton has to do this summer is they're going to have to go out and do what Pittsburgh did last summer and find value adds. You're going to have to find value players who maybe haven't had an opportunity to show what they're made of. Maybe they haven't had, maybe they just are coming off a bad year, or like in the case of an Anthony Mantha last summer, coming off an injury year. Like, that's what it's going to take. You're not going to be in the mix for Alex Tuck. You're not going to be in the mix for Darren Radish. Not that they need a guy like Darren Radish, but I'm just as an example. So, like, for Edmonton, you got to go find value. And there are guys out there like that Edmonton could maybe go get that teams might be interested in moving. So, like, a guy I'm thinking of that might be somebody that, like Pittsburgh, for example, they got Justin Brazeau. He's making $1.5 million. He had a great year, career high. Like, maybe there's some value still within him. Maybe you can go get him in a trade. Now, I don't think it's going to be easy because Dubas knows what he has in Justin Brazeau. So you're going to have to give something to get something. But, like, that's a guy who's got 1 year left on his deal, $1.5 million. He's going to be a motivated player. Maybe he's a guy who you could bring in who would be an effective player. But, again, it's going to cost you draft picks or prospects. And Pittsburgh, I don't know what direction they're going to go in, but that's just an example of the type of player that you could go for, right? And there are guys out there. And there are guys in free agency that you can buy low on too. You just have to be smart. Now, the thing I worry about for Edmonton is Stan Bowman being Stan Bowman. He's going to go out and try to get a guy like Noel Acciari, who also played for Pittsburgh. But a guy like that who had a good year, he's like 33, and they're going to give him like a 3 or 4 year deal at like $3 million a year. And he's going to be good for one of those years and terrible for the next two. That's the Stan Bowman move. I'm sorry. That's what he does. All right, so let's talk about guys that I would target as far as the Oilers go. Now, obviously Edmonton's going to have some needs, but it depends ultimately who they plan to move out. I don't see them moving anybody out, if I'm being perfectly honest, but some of the guys that I would go for if I'm Edmonton is guys that I feel are going to be undervalued in free agency and could thrive in an environment like Edmonton. So I'll just throw some names out, but like some of these you will not like, and I'm going specifically with their on ice stuff, but like A guy like Tony DeAngelo, he's not going to get much money. He's not going to have a lot of interest. He is a guy who could be a value add. You might get him on a 1 or a 2 year deal. He will put up points from the back end. He's not good defensively. He's real not good defensively. But as far as like a third, maybe a third pairing cheap guy who can play on your second power play, he would be the type of guy you could target. Some other guys that you could potentially target. Now, it depends. Like, Edmonton's not so much concerned about youth because they're kind of in the middle of things, but like a guy that I think will be undervalued, this is another forward, is Andrei Kuzmenko. He can score. He didn't have a good year last year. 25 points in like 52 games, 13 goals. But he can score. He can play on the wing and he can put pucks in the net. Ultimately, he's going to be looking probably for a 1 year prove-it deal. It's a good guy to bring in. Give me another guy. This is a guy that can play in your bottom six and is a real pain in the ass, and that's Nick Cousins. Again, it's going to be like a 1 year, $1.25 million deal, but he pisses people off and he's hard to play against. Edmonton needs some of that. It's a guy I would look at. He's going to be undervalued. Another potential guy to bring in who had an injury-plagued season, Teddy Bluger. He's going to be a guy looking at a short-term deal. Teddy Bluger can play fourth-line center. He's probably not going to cost you more than $2 million, maybe even less, depending on what the market looks like for him. But that's a guy I would look to bring in. Underappreciated. That's what you're looking for right now. That's really what you're looking for. Guys that maybe flamed out elsewhere or whatever it happens to be, but these are guys that can certainly play and they won't cost you a ton of money. You worry about guys like a Marcus Johansson had a great year. He's old. He had 49 points. He's probably not going to do that again. And this is something that Edmonton has to concern themselves with is you are paying for what their future is going to be, not what their past is going to be. And for Stan Bowman, too much of what he's done has been like what the guy's done previously. That's the Jake Wallman extension. What he did recently, like he didn't even look far enough back at what Wallman was before he inked that long-term deal. But like that's what you got to pay for. What's this guy going to do? And that's the thing. And like if you want to talk about like another forward who I think is going to be undervalued, is going to be Michael Bunting. Now Bunting, the cool thing about him is that he can kind of play in your top 9, but like if you're in a pinch and you got injuries, you can elevate him to the top 6, and he's not going to set you too far back. But he can play. You know, he didn't have a good run in Dallas, but he's like a 30 to 40 point guy. And I don't imagine he's going to get a huge lucrative long-term deal this summer. So there you go. Like that's a guy to go after. So those are just some of the guys that I would be targeting if I was the Edmonton Oilers in free agency. They don't have a choice. Like they got to go out in free agency and get some guys that can sort of chip in some offense and, you know, play in their bottom 6. We'll see. We'll see what happens ultimately, but I don't really like the way this is setting up for the Oilers. I think they're in a lot of trouble this summer, and it's one of the worst spots you could be in as a general manager is to be desperate. And Stan Bowman's going to be desperate to save his job this summer. I really think that. I think it's going to be problematic for the Oilers. I think he's going to do a lot of boneheaded things. I don't know that he's going to do any of the stuff that I just said, but like my first order of business, I'm looking at my season. And, like, I understand that none of what I mentioned addresses the goaltending. But, like, to be perfectly honest, I don't really know how you address the goaltending. I've read some people say, like, Sergei Bobrovsky, but it's like, come on. Like, is that actually in the conversation? Is that really in the conversation? Like, personally, I actually didn't mind Connor Ingram. I think I would bring him back as the backup. But you got to go out and get somebody else to be your starter, and I really don't know who that's going to be. You're not going to find it in free agency. Maybe, but I don't think you'd ever convince him to do this. But like Freddie Anderson, he's on a hell of a run. I think Carolina's probably going to bring him back because he seems to love it there. So like that takes out the best opportunity you have. You have to go find value. You have to go find, like, Kyle Dubas found Artur Shilovs last year for a 4th-round pick. Now, Artur Shilovs is not a world beater. He didn't win the Vezina, and you know, he was probably below average for most of the season. But, like, he had his moments where he was really, really good. So you're going to have to go and try to find value like that. Not exactly that, but, you know, I don't know where you get it. Maybe you have to do this thing by committee. Maybe you bring Ingram back and you bring in, like, a third guy, like a Matt Murray, and then you try to find maybe like a Jordan Binnington. Maybe you can finagle Tristan Jarry into that trade with St. Louis and try to bring Binnington back for 1 year. Like, I don't really know what the solution is as far as that goes, but like, there's certainly no starters available in free agency. You don't have the bullets to go get a high-end goaltender. You got to go find value somewhere. Maybe, you know what? You might be able to convince LA, depending on what they do with their goaltending, or even maybe New Jersey, who can't be happy with Jacob Markstrom. You might be able to find like a Darcy Kemper or Jacob Markstrom, go be able to pick a guy up like that for not very much in terms of assets. But here's the problem. You only have $16.5 million of cap space. So if you go get a Darcy Kemper, or you go get a Jacob Markstrom, $6 million in your cap space, you better hope you move Jarry. If you move Jarry and you bring back in a Markstrom or a Binnington or a Kemper, at least you get like you're shuffling the furniture. All those guys have been inconsistent, but like I think Jarry's just the worst out of the bunch. I really do. I don't think you can get as inconsistent as Jarry. So, you know, even Binnington, if you have Binnington, Ingram, and like a Matt Murray as your third string, maybe you can somehow cobble together a decent year in net. But I mean, you still got to address the goaltending. You really do. One of the worst parts of that Jarry trade, aside from taking on Jarry and his contract, is that you shipped Brett Kulak out the door. Was very responsible defensively. He's still playing with Colorado. There's a reason they picked him up. And Brett Kulak, you know, I get it. He was in the last year of his deal. He maybe wasn't going to re-sign, but they need guys like that can actually play defense. And again, I don't know you're going to find those guys in free agency that can actually be true shutdown guys. Teams overpay those guys an awful lot. Just look at, you know, Cody Cece's not a shutdown guy, and he's making $4 million a year. No, 4.5 actually, I think. And like Ben Sherratt, sorry, making almost $4 million, and like just a drain on his teammates and whoever's paired with him defensively. But like, he keeps getting paid. That's the way it is. So I don't know. I'm curious to get your takes. Tell me what you think the Oilers should do this summer to try to squeeze the last little bit out of this McDavid era that they possibly can. Let me know in the comments. And if you like the show, of course, like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Again, I'm Josh Cybulski. Please follow wherever you find us. Take care. Good luck, Oilers fans.